The scent of pine and frost hung in the air as I trudged through the snow-laden forest, my breath forming small clouds before me. Winter had descended early this year, cruel and unforgiving. Much like the world I inhabited, the bundle in my arms whimpered softly, and I pulled the worn blanket tighter around his tiny body, shielding him from the biting wind that cut through my threadbare coat. "Shh, little one," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the howling wind. "We'll find somewhere warm soon." The village lay behind me, its lights growing dimmer with each step I took into the dense woods. I hadn't belonged there, not really. As an Omega without a pack, without protection, I was invisible at best, a target at worst. The child I carried wasn't mine by birth, but had become mine by choice when I'd found him abandoned at the edge of the forest 3 days ago, his small form shivering in the underbrush. He was different. One leg twisted at an unnatural angle, one arm smaller than the other. A Lycan pup, disabled, unwanted. In their world, strength meant survival. Weakness meant death. I understood that reality all too well. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory as I navigated the treacherous path. "Kindness in a cruel world isn't weakness, Eleanor. It's the greatest form of rebellion." The silver pendant she had given me hung around my neck, warm against my skin despite the cold. A howling wolf with amber eyes, the only inheritance she had left me besides her wisdom. My fingers brushed against it for courage as I ventured deeper into Lycan territory. I knew the risks. Humans rarely crossed these borders, especially not Omegas like me. Sensitive to energies, attuned to emotions, considered useful only for serving others. And certainly not humans carrying a Lycan child. But the little one needed care I couldn't provide in the village, where suspicious eyes had already begun to notice my strange new charge. The trees grew thicker, closer together, their branches forming a canopy that blocked what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. Something changed in the air, a stillness that hadn't been there before. The hair on the back of my neck rose, and the pup in my arms grew quiet, as if sensing the shift. I stopped, suddenly aware I was being watched. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly turned, scanning the darkness between the trees. A pair of golden eyes gleamed in the shadows, unblinking and predatory, not animal, not human. Something in between. Lycan. Time seemed to freeze as those eyes held mine. I didn't run. Couldn't run. Not with the child in my arms. Instead, I held the bundle closer to my chest, my body curving protectively around him. "I mean no harm," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm just passing through." A low growl answered me, rumbling through the clearing like distant thunder. The sound vibrated in my chest, primal and ancient. Then came movement, the shadow detaching itself from the darkness, taking form as it approached. He emerged into a patch of moonlight, and my breath caught. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his powerful body a seamless blend of man and wolf, broad shoulders tapered to a narrow waist, covered in a pelt of midnight black fur that gleamed with health and vitality. His face was more human than wolf, but with the sharp angles and elongated features of a predator. Those golden eyes, intelligent, calculating, assessed me with cold precision. I'd heard stories of the Lycan king, ruthless, uncompromising, a leader who had unified the warring packs through force and fear. The silver streaks in his dark mane marked him as the alpha among alphas, and I, a human Omega, stood in his territory holding what I now realized with mounting horror must be one of his own. The pup whimpered again, squirming in my arms. The sound drew the Lycan King's attention, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, followed by recognition. Then something darker I couldn't name. "That child," he said, his voice deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "Where did you get him?" The truth was my only option. "I found him abandoned at the forest's edge 3 days ago. He was alone, freezing. My voice broke. I couldn't leave him there." The Lycan King moved closer, each step deliberate. I fought the instinct to back away, holding my ground even as fear coursed through me. "Show me," he commanded. With trembling fingers, I pulled back the edge of the blanket, revealing the pup's face. His eyes, golden like the king's, blinked up at the night sky. His features were delicate, beautiful despite the slight asymmetry of his jaw. When the blanket shifted further, exposing his malformed limbs, I felt rather than heard the king's sharp intake of breath. He was left to die, the king stated. Not a question, but a grim acknowledgement. Yes. I swallowed hard. I was taking him deeper into your territory, hoping to find someone who... I hesitated. Someone who might know how to care for him properly. I've done what I can, but he needs more than I can give. The Lycan King's eyes narrowed, studying me with new intensity. You crossed into dangerous territory, human, for a child not your own, a damaged child of your enemy's kind. He's not my enemy, I said softly, looking down at the pup. He's just a child who deserves a chance to live. Something indecipherable flashed across the king's face. He reached out suddenly and I flinched, expecting violence. Instead, one clawed finger gently traced the silver pendant at my throat. Where did you get this? He demanded. My grandmother. It was hers. Your grandmother, he repeated, withdrawing his hand. What was her name? Ilara, I replied, confusion threading through my fear. Ilara Bennett. The name seemed to strike him like a physical blow. He took a step back, reassessing me with those penetrating eyes. Come, he said abruptly, turning away. The child will die in this cold, and you along with him. When I didn't immediately follow, he looked back over his shoulder, impatience evident in the set of his powerful frame. Unless you'd prefer to freeze, Omega? I clutched the pup tighter and took a hesitant step forward. Where are you taking us? To warmth. To safety. His lips curved in what might have been a smile or a snarl. For now. The unspoken threat hung in the air between us, but I had no choice. The pup needed shelter, and we were deep in Lycan territory with night falling fast. I followed the king through the maze of trees, struggling to keep pace with his long strides. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes. Time seemed fluid in the strange, muffled quiet of the snow-laden forest. The king occasionally glanced back, his expression unreadable. Once, when I stumbled on an exposed root, he was beside me in an instant, one large hand steadying my elbow. His touch burned through the thin fabric of my coat, and he withdrew quickly, as if the contact disturbed him as much as it did me. The forest began to thin, giving way to a clearing. My eyes widened as a massive structure came into view, not the primitive den I had imagined, but a sprawling stone fortress that rose from the mountainside, like it had grown there naturally. Lights glowed from numerous windows, and smoke curled from multiple chimneys. Your castle, I murmured in awe. My pack's home, he corrected, leading me toward a side entrance rather than the imposing main doors. We slipped inside through a heavy wooden door, warmth immediately enveloping us. The pup stirred in my arms, his tiny face relaxing as the heat soothed him. I felt my own tense muscles begin to unwind, my fingers and toes tingling painfully as circulation returned. The corridors we traversed were surprisingly elegant. Stone walls hung with tapestries depicting hunting scenes and ancient battles, floors covered with richly colored rugs that muffled our footsteps. We passed few others, but those we did encounter stopped and stared, their expressions ranging from shock to outright hostility. The king ignored them all, and none dared address him directly. Finally, he ushered me into a large chamber dominated by a roaring fireplace. The room was well appointed with comfortable furniture, bookshelves lining one wall, and large windows, currently shuttered against the cold, along another. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to a chair near the fire. I obeyed, sinking gratefully into the cushioned seat. The pup wriggled in my arms, making small noises of contentment at the warmth. The king watched us, his stance rigid, hands clasped behind his back. In the firelight, I could see him more clearly. His features were harsh, yet strangely beautiful. High cheekbones, strong jaw darkened with stubble, a straight nose that had perhaps been broken once. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, silver against his tanned skin. He looked younger than I had first thought, perhaps in his 30s, though I knew Lycans aged differently than humans. Why didn't you leave him to his fate? He asked suddenly. Most humans would have. Most, perhaps. Not me. I met his gaze steadily. Would you have preferred that I had? His eyes narrowed. What I prefer is irrelevance. I'm curious about your motivation. I looked down at the pup, who had fallen asleep in the warmth, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. I don't need a reason to help a child. In my experience, humans always have reasons, especially when dealing with our kind. He moved closer, looming over me. What do you want in return? Protection? Status? Gold? Nothing. The word came out sharper than I intended. I want nothing from you or your kind. I only wanted to find someone who could care for him properly before returning to my own life. Your own life, he repeated, skepticism evident in his tone. And what life is that, Omega? I smell no Alpha's claim on you. No pack, you're alone. The truth of his words stung more than I cared to admit. I manage. Barely, from the looks of it. His gaze swept over my worn clothes, lingering on the frayed edges of my sleeves and the patches on my boots. I lifted my chin. Not all of us need luxury to survive, Your Majesty. The title, spoken with a hint of defiance, drew a surprised bark of laughter from him. The sound transformed his face, softening the hard edges, making him appear almost approachable. You have spirit for one so fragile, he said, amusement still coloring his voice. Tell me your name, Omega. Eleanor, I replied. Eleanor Bennett. Eleanor. He tested the name, rolling it on his tongue like a foreign taste. I am Rowan. He offered no title, no family name, not that he needed to. Everyone in these parts knew of Rowan, the Lycan king who had brought the warring packs to heal through blood and fire. A knock at the door interrupted us. Rowan called for the visitor to enter, and a female Lycan appeared, her manner deferential but not servile. You summoned a healer, my king? She asked, her curious gaze darting to me and the bundle in my arms. Yes. This child requires examination. He gestured toward us. And provide proper attire for our guest. She'll be staying. I started at this. I never agreed to. You crossed into my territory carrying a Lycan child. You'll stay until I determine your true intentions. His tone brooked no argument. Consider yourself fortunate that my curiosity outweighs my suspicion for now. The female Lycan approached cautiously, her brown eyes kind despite her obvious confusion at my presence. May I? She asked, holding out her arms for the pup. Reluctantly, I surrendered my small charge, immediately feeling the loss of his warmth against my chest. The healer cradled him expertly, pulling back the blanket to examine him more thoroughly. He's malnourished, she said, frowning. And these deformities. He would have been considered unfit by traditional law. Traditional law, Rowan repeated, his expression darkening. A practice I've been trying to change for years. This surprised me. Everything I'd heard about the Lycan king suggested ruthlessness, not compassion for the weak. The healer continued her examination, gently manipulating the pup's limbs. The leg could be straightened with proper binding. The arm... She hesitated. The arm is more complicated, but not beyond help. Do what you can, Rowan instructed, and prepare the adjoining chamber for our guest. Yes, my king. The healer bowed slightly, still holding the pup. To me, she added, I'll take good care of him, I promise. As she turned to leave, panic rose in my throat. Wait. I stood quickly, dizzy from the sudden movement. Rowan caught my arm as I swayed, steadying me with that same burning touch. The child will be returned to you once he's been treated, he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. You have my word. The healer departed with the pup, leaving me alone with the Lycan king. His hand still gripped my arm, the heat of his touch seeping through my thin sleeve. When I glanced down at the contact, he released me abruptly, as if suddenly aware of the impropriety. You need rest, he said, stepping back to restore the space between us. And food. As if summoned by his words, my stomach growled audibly. I hadn't eaten since morning, a meager breakfast of stale bread that I'd shared with the pup. Heat rushed to my face at the betrayal of my body. Rowan's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. He moved to a cord hanging near the fireplace and pulled it once. Within moments, another Lycan appeared, a young male with tawny hair and alert eyes. "Bring food for our guest," Rowan ordered. "Something substantial." The Lycan nodded and disappeared, leaving us once again in uncomfortable silence. Rowan gestured for me to sit, then took the chair opposite mine. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the sharp angles of his face and the unusual gold of his eyes. "Your grandmother," he said suddenly. "Alara Bennett. She lived near the old crossroads, in a cottage with blue shutters." I stared at him in astonishment. "Yes. How did you?" "She healed one of my packmates once, many years ago, a female who had been attacked by hunters." His gaze drifted to the fire. "When others refused to help, your grandmother took her in, tended her wounds." The revelation struck me silent. Grandmother had never mentioned helping a Lycan, though she'd taught me much about healing. She had been the village healer before me, respected, but also feared for her knowledge and her willingness to treat those others shunned. "The pendant you wear," Rowan continued. "It was a gift from that female, a token of gratitude." My fingers instinctively found the silver wolf at my throat. She never told me. The alliance between humans and Lycans was even more tenuous then than it is now. Perhaps she thought it safer to keep silent. His eyes returned to mine. "She passed her compassion to you, it seems." Before I could respond, the door opened, and the young Lycan returned, bearing a tray laden with food: steaming soup, fresh bread, cheese, and what appeared to be roasted venison. My mouth watered at the sight. "Leave it," Rowan commanded, and the servant set the tray on a small table near my chair, before departing with a curious backward glance. "Eat," the king said, and though it was clearly in order, his tone had softened. I didn't need to be told twice. I fell upon the food with an eagerness that would have embarrassed me under different circumstances. The soup was rich with herbs and vegetables, the bread still warm from the oven, the meat tender and perfectly seasoned. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten so well. Rowan watched me eat, his expression unreadable. When I'd nearly finished, he spoke again. "The pup you found, do you know which pack he belongs to?" I shook my head, swallowing a bite of bread. "No. I only know he was alone at the forest's edge, near the western village boundary." "Western," he repeated, his brow furrowing. "The Stone Ridge pack controls that territory." He fell silent, contemplating this information. Will you return him to them?" I asked hesitantly. His golden eyes flashed. "They left him to die. He will not be returned." The vehemence in his voice startled me. "Then what will happen to him?" "He'll remain here, under my protection." Rowan's gaze was steady. "As will you, until we determine who is responsible for abandoning a pup against pack law." "I can't stay," I protested. "I have responsibilities in the village, people who need my healing skills." "And yet you were leaving when I found you, were you not?" His tone was knowing, carrying the pup deeper into Lycan territory, away from your village. I looked down at my plate. They were growing suspicious, hostile. A human caring for a Lycan child. I trailed off, the memory of whispered accusations and cold stares still fresh. "So you were cast out," he concluded, as was the pup. "Two unwanted strays." The description, though accurate, stung. I wasn't cast out. I chose to leave before things escalated. Rowan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Listen carefully, Eleanor Bennett. You're now involved in Lycan politics whether you wish it or not. The abandonment of a pup, especially one with royal bloodlines, is a serious offense." My heart stuttered. Royal bloodlines? The markings on his left shoulder, the 3 silver crescent moons, they indicate he is born of the royal line. His expression hardened. My line. The implications crashed over me. "He's not my son," Rowan cut in sharply, "but my blood nonetheless. A nephew, perhaps, or a cousin several times removed. The royal bloodline runs through several branches of the pack." Relief washed through me, followed immediately by confusion at my own reaction. What did it matter to me whether the pup was his son or not? Abandoning him was not only cruel but treasonous. Rowan continued. "I need to know who is responsible." "And I can help you with that. How exactly?" I asked, setting aside my now empty plate. "You found him. You may have seen something, heard something. without realizing its significance. He rose from his chair and began pacing, the predator in him evident in the fluid grace of his movements. "And you bear my grandmother's pendant. It's a sign I cannot ignore." "A sign of what?" He stopped, fixing me with that intense golden stare. "That's what I intend to discover." The door opened again, and the healer returned, her arms now empty of the pup. I stood quickly, anxiety flooding me. "He's resting comfortably," she said before I could speak, correctly interpreting my concern. "I've set his leg and applied healing salve to his skin. He's been fed and is sleeping peacefully." "Can I see him?" I asked. The healer looked to Rowan, who nodded once. "Show her," he instructed. "This way," the healer said, gesturing for me to follow. "I've placed him in the chamber adjoining yours." I followed her through a door I hadn't noticed before, which led to a smaller but equally comfortable room. A crackling fire provided both warmth and soft light. In a small bed near the fire lay the pup, swaddled in clean blankets, his injured leg carefully splinted, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. I moved to his bedside, relief coursing through me at the sight of his steady breathing and improved color. "Thank you," I said to the healer. She smiled, her brown eyes warm. "You've done well with him, considering your limited resources. He would have died without your care." "What's wrong with his arm?" I asked, noting how it was positioned carefully at his side. "The bones didn't form properly before birth," she explained. "It's not uncommon, but usually—" She hesitated. "Usually such pups are culled." Rowan's voice came from the doorway. He entered the room, his massive frame making the space feel suddenly smaller, an old practice born of hard times when the packs couldn't afford to care for those who might not survive. "But he would survive," I said, anger kindling in my chest. "He's strong in every way that matters." "Yes," Rowan agreed, surprising me. "He is." He approached the bed, looking down at the sleeping pup with an expression I couldn't quite identify, something between sorrow and determination. Gently, with a tenderness I wouldn't have expected from those powerful hands, he brushed a finger along the pup's cheek. "Leave us," he said to the healer, who bowed and withdrew quietly. "You care for him," I observed, "even though you just met him." "He is Pack," Rowan said simply, "and he has been wronged." He turned those golden eyes on me. "As have you, it seems." I shook my head. "I'm fine." "Are you?" He stepped closer, and I caught his scent, pine and smoke and something wild. "An Omega alone, cast out by your village, bearing the burden of another's child." "I wasn't cast out," I insisted again. "And he's not a burden." "No," Rowan agreed, his gaze returning to the pup. "Not a burden. A blessing, perhaps. One that led you to my territory, wearing the pendant of a woman my pack once owed a debt." Something in his tone made me uneasy. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't believe in coincidences, Eleanor Bennett." He said my name with careful precision, as if testing each syllable. "You appear at my borders with a royal pup and Alara's pendant at a time when dissent grows within the packs. The old ways clash with the new. Some believe I've grown too, progressive in my rule." "Progressive?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. A humorless smile curved his lips. "Did you think me a complete tyrant? I earned my reputation through necessary violence, yes. The packs needed unification, needed a strong hand. But strength without compassion breeds only resentment and rebellion." He moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain to reveal the night beyond. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. "I've been working to change the old laws," he continued. "The culling of disabled pups, the subjugation of Omegas, the isolation from human settlements." He let the curtain fall back into place. "Not everyone agrees with these changes." "And you think the abandonment of this pup is related to that disagreement?" I said slowly, piecing it together. "A message, perhaps, or a test of my resolve." His voice lowered to a growl. "Either way, it will not stand." The pup stirred in his sleep, making a small, distressed sound. Without thinking, I reached out to soothe him, stroking his soft hair. He settled immediately, leaning into my touch. "He trusts you," Rowan observed, We've been through a lot together these past few days. Yes. He watched my hand as it continued its gentle motion. The healer tells me you've been giving him herbs for pain, knowledge few humans possess. My grandmother taught me, I explained, before she died. Another gift from Alara, he murmured. Then, more firmly, you'll stay here while he heals. Both for your safety, and to help us identify those responsible for his abandonment. It wasn't a request. And if I refuse? His eyes met mine, challenging. Do you wish to refuse? To return to a village that shunned you? To face the winter alone? The truth was, I didn't. The warmth of the castle, the security it offered, the care being given to the pup, all were more than I could provide on my own. But submission had never come easily to me, even when it was in my best interest. I'll stay, I said finally. For him. But I'm not your prisoner. No, Rowan agreed, his expression softening fractionally. Not a prisoner, a guest. Under my personal protection. The weight of those words hung in the air between us. Personal protection from the Lycan king was no small thing. Rest now, he said, moving toward the door. Tomorrow will bring many questions, and you'll need your strength. As he reached the threshold, I called after him. Rowan. He paused, looking back, surprise evident in his features. Perhaps at my boldness in using his name without title. Thank you, I said simply. For helping him. Something flickered in his golden eyes, an emotion I couldn't name. Then he nodded once and was gone, leaving me alone with the sleeping pup and a growing sense that my life had changed irrevocably. I woke to sunlight streaming through a gap in the heavy curtains and the unfamiliar sensation of sleeping on something other than my thin straw mattress. For a moment, disorientation gripped me, the soft bed, the warm blankets, the stone walls hung with tapestries, until memory rushed back. The Lycan king, the castle, the pup. I bolted upright, my gaze immediately seeking the small bed near the fire. Empty. Panic surged through me as I threw back the covers and stood, still dressed in yesterday's clothes, though someone had removed my boots. The door to my chamber opened before I could reach it, and the female healer from the previous night entered, carrying a tray. Good morning, she said, her tone friendly. The little one is fine. He's being bathed and fed. I thought you might want breakfast. Relief washed over me, followed by embarrassment at my reaction. Thank you, I managed, running a hand through my tangled blonde hair. I'm sorry, you were worried, she finished for me, setting the tray on a small table. It's natural. You've been his sole protector for days. She gestured to the tray which held bread, fruit, and a steaming mug that smelled of herbs and honey. Eat. Then I've brought fresh clothes for you, and there's water for washing through there. She pointed to another door I hadn't noticed the night before. That's very kind, I said, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must look and smell after days of traveling through the forest. I don't know your name. Mara, she replied with a smile that transformed her serious face. And you're Eleanor, the human healer who saved our king's kin. The whole castle is talking about you. I nearly choked on the piece of bread I'd just bitten into. Talking about me? We don't get many human visitors, Mara said, a twinkle in her brown eyes. Certainly not ones who arrive carrying royal pups and wearing ancient tokens of alliance. Ancient tokens? I touched the wolf pendant at my throat. That symbol hasn't been given to a human in over a century, she explained. It marks you as a friend of the pack. Before I could ask more questions, another knock came at the door. Mara opened it to reveal a tall, imposing female Lycan, with striking silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe braid. The king requests her presence in the Great Hall once she's presentable, the newcomer said to Mara without acknowledging me directly. Her voice was clipped, her manner cold. Of course, Thea, Mara replied, her own demeanor becoming more formal. I'll see to it. The female, Thea, gave me a quick, assessing glance, her lip curling slightly before she turned and strode away. Don't mind her, Mara said once the door closed. Thea is the king's head advisor. She's traditional. I understood the implication. She doesn't approve of humans in the castle. She doesn't approve of many things, Mara said diplomatically. Now hurry and eat. The king doesn't like to be kept waiting. After a quick breakfast, and an even quicker wash with the basin of warm water provided, I donned the clothes Mara had brought, simple but well-made garments that fit surprisingly well. A pale blue dress of soft wool, warm stockings, and sturdy leather boots that were a vast improvement over my worn ones. "The pup?" I asked as Mara helped me lace the dress. "The king has him," she replied. "He's been personally overseeing his care this morning." This surprised me. I'd imagined Rowan delegating such a task to servants, not handling it himself. Mara led me through a maze of corridors, passing Lycans of various ranks and positions, who stared openly at me, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. I kept my chin up, refusing to be intimidated, though my heart raced at the attention. The great hall lived up to its name, a vast chamber with soaring ceilings supported by massive timber beams. A huge fireplace dominated one wall, large enough that I could have stood inside it. Windows of colored glass cast prisms of light across the stone floor, and long tables flanked a central aisle that led to a raised dais where a single throne-like chair stood. Rowan sat there, not lounging but alert, his powerful frame emanating authority. The pup was indeed with him, cradled in one arm, while his free hand gestured as he spoke to a group of Lycans gathered before the dais. He looked different in daylight, still intimidating, but less menacing than he had appeared in the shadowed forest. He wore a simple black tunic that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, and his dark hair was pulled back, revealing the strong lines of his face. As we approached, the conversation halted, and all eyes turned to us. I fought the urge to shrink under the collective gaze of so many predators. "Ah, our guest awakens," Rowan said, his deep voice carrying easily through the hall. "Come forward, Eleanor Bennett." Mara gave me a gentle nudge, and I walked down the central aisle alone, acutely aware of the whispers that followed me. When I reached the foot of the dais, I stopped, uncertain of the proper protocol. "Good morning, Your Majesty," I said, deciding that formality was the safest approach. A flicker of amusement crossed his features at my address. "Did you rest well?" he asked, shifting the pup in his arms. The little one looked better already, his color improved, his eyes brighter, regarding me with recognition. "Yes, thank you," I replied, my attention drawn to the pup. "And he seems well." "He is improving," Rowan agreed. "Thanks to your initial care and Mara's healing skills." I was surprised by the public acknowledgement. From the reactions of those around us, so were they. "I've called you here because we've made a discovery," Rowan continued, his tone becoming more serious. "The pup has a birthmark, one that was hidden beneath the dirt when you found him." He turned the child slightly, revealing a small crescent-shaped mark at the base of his neck. "This identifies his lineage precisely. He is the son of my cousin, Alaric, who leads the Stone Ridge Pack." Murmurs spread through the gathered Lycans at this revelation. "Alaric, who has reported no missing children," Rowan added, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Alaric, who has publicly opposed my reforms regarding the treatment of disabled pack members." Now I understood why the king had taken a personal interest in the pup. This wasn't just about a random abandoned child. This was family politics, pack politics. "The pup needs a name," Rowan announced, looking down at the child. "Until his father acknowledges him, which I will ensure happens, he falls under my protection and requires a proper identity." To my astonishment, Rowan looked to me. "You found him, saved him. The honor should be yours." I blinked, momentarily speechless at being granted such a privilege. The Lycans around us shifted, some muttering in disapproval. "My king!" A voice spoke up. Thea, the advisor I'd met earlier, stepping forward with a frown. "Surely such an honor belongs to a pack member, not a human." "She wore the wolf token," Rowan replied firmly, "and she showed more pack loyalty than those who abandoned him." Thea's lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure, but she stepped back, knowing better than to challenge her king publicly. I approached the dais, looking at the small face watching me with curious golden eyes. What name could possibly suit this resilient little soul who had survived against all odds? "Ethan," I said softly. It means strong and enduring. Rowan considered this, then nodded. Ethan of the royal line, he proclaimed. Under my protection and the protection of Eleanor Bennett, who bears the wolf token. This declaration sent another ripple of whispers through the hall. I hadn't expected to be formally linked to the pup's protection, and from the reactions around me, neither had anyone else. Now, Rowan said, addressing the gathered Lycans, I ride to Stone Ridge to speak with Alaric. In my absence, Eleanor and the pup will remain here, under guard. They are to be treated with all respect due to guests under royal protection. He handed Ethan to me, our fingers brushing in the exchange. That same jolt of warmth shot through me at the contact, and from the slight narrowing of his eyes, I knew he felt it too. Thea will serve as regent in my absence, he continued, breaking our gaze to address the hall. I expect to return within 3 days. With that, he stood, towering over me from his position on the dais. Walk with me, he said in a lower voice, meant only for my ears. I followed him as he strode from the hall, cradling Ethan against my chest. The pup snuggled closer, his small hands clutching at my dress. Once we were in a quieter corridor, Rowan slowed his pace. You've been given a position of significance, he said without preamble. Not everyone will approve. I noticed, I replied dryly. Your advisor Thea seems particularly displeased. A small smile tugged at his lips. Thea disapproves of most things on principle, but she is loyal and capable. Why did you do it? I asked. Link me publicly to Ethan's protection? Rowan stopped walking, turning to face me fully. Because you are already linked to him in all the ways that matter. You saved him when others would not. You carried him through hostile territory to find him help. His golden eyes held mine intently. And because I need allies who value compassion over tradition. The admission surprised me. You believe I'm such an ally? I believe you could be, he said carefully. The reforms I seek, ending the culling of disabled pups, improving relations with humans, creating a more just hierarchy within the packs. These things require support from unexpected quarters, including human omegas. I raised an eyebrow, especially those with healing skills and the courage to challenge conventions. His gaze dropped to Ethan, who had fallen asleep in my arms. He will need an advocate when I confront Alaric. Someone who can speak to his care with authority. You want me to go with you? I asked, alarmed at the prospect of facing a hostile Lycan pack. No, that would be too dangerous, but I need your knowledge, your observations of his condition when you found him. Rowan's expression darkened. I need evidence of neglect to force Alaric's acknowledgement and ensure the pup's place in the pack hierarchy. I nodded slowly, understanding now why my presence had been formalized. I'll tell you everything I know. Good. He resumed walking, leading me to a small study where maps were spread across a large table. This is Stone Ridge territory, he said, pointing to an area marked with a distinctive symbol. Alaric controls the western border that touches human lands. That's where I found Ethan, I confirmed. Just inside the human boundary. Rowan's jaw tightened, as I suspected. Left precisely where he might be found by humans, but far enough into Lycan territory that Alaric could claim no knowledge of it. A coward's abandonment, I said, anger coloring my voice. Not even giving him a clean death, but leaving his fate to chance. Exactly. Rowan's eyes flashed with approval at my understanding. It speaks to calculation, not just cruelty. Will Alaric admit to it? I asked. No, but he will not be able to deny the evidence of his bloodline. Rowan traced a finger along the map. I'll take a small force, enough to show strength, but not to threaten war. I shifted Ethan in my arms, looking down at his peaceful face. What happens to him if Alaric acknowledges him? He returns to his birth pack, but under my direct protection and supervision. No harm will come to him. Rowan's voice softened as he added, and you would be welcome to visit him, to continue overseeing his care. The thought of being separated from Ethan created an unexpected ache in my chest, but I pushed it aside. And if Alaric refuses, then Ethan remains here, as my ward. Rowan's eyes met mine, with you as his caretaker, if you wish it. The offer stunned me, You would allow a human to raise a Lycan royal? A human who already proved her worth by saving him? Rowan countered. Yes. There was something in his gaze I couldn't quite interpret, a kind of intensity that made me look away first. I should prepare for your departure, I said, seeking safer conversational ground. Write down everything I observed about Ethan's condition when I found him. Yes. Rowan nodded, seeming to collect himself. Do that. I leave at midday. He reached out suddenly, his hand hovering near my face before he drew it back, as if thinking better of whatever gesture he'd intended. You'll be safe here, he said instead. Despite some initial wariness, my pack will honor my command to protect you. I'm not afraid, I told him, and realized with some surprise that it was true. Despite being surrounded by predators in an unfamiliar place, I felt more secure than I had in the village where I'd lived all my life. No, Rowan agreed, a hint of that almost smile playing at his lips again. You're not, are you? Perhaps that's why Ethan trusts you. He senses your strength. With that curious compliment, he turned to study the maps again, effectively dismissing me. I left the study with Ethan still sleeping in my arms, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought me to this place. Under the protection of the fearsome Lycan king, who was proving to be far more complex than the stories had painted him. The next 3 days passed in an unexpected rhythm of caring for Ethan and navigating the complex social hierarchy of the castle in Rowan's absence. True to the king's word, I was treated with reluctant respect by most, though always with an undercurrent of suspicion. Mara proved to be a genuine ally, teaching me the basics of Lycan etiquette and explaining the intricacies of pack dynamics. The royal bloodline carries special abilities, she explained as we sat in the castle gardens, a sheltered courtyard where hardy winter plants still thrived under glass enclosures. Ethan lay on a blanket between us, happily batting at colorful fabric toys Mara had fashioned for him. What kind of abilities? I asked, adjusting the splint on Ethan's leg, which was already showing remarkable improvement. Enhanced strength, even by Lycan standards, keener senses, but most importantly, the ability to calm the feral nature of others. She nodded toward Ethan, who was gurgling contentedly. Even damaged as he is, you can feel it in his presence, a soothing quality. I had noticed it, the way my own anxieties seemed to quiet when I held him, the way even the most hostile Lycans softened slightly when they saw him. Is that why Rowan is so determined to protect him? For his abilities? Mara's expression grew serious. Partly, but there's more to it. The king was once like Ethan, born with a defect. This revelation stunned me, but he's so perfect. The word slipped out before I could stop it, and heat rushed to my cheeks. Mara smiled knowingly. Now yes. But as a pup, he had a malformed foot. His father, the old king, protected him against tradition, insisted he could still lead. When Rowan was 10, a healer from the northern packs developed a treatment that corrected it. Her voice lowered. Not everyone has forgotten his origins. Some still whisper that he's unfit to rule because of that early weakness. That's absurd, I said, indignant on Rowan's behalf. He unified warring packs, established peace. Through strength and force, yes, Mara agreed. But now he seeks to change things through compassion and reform. Some see that as proof that his defect weakened him. Compassion isn't weakness, I said firmly, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. No, Mara said, watching me with thoughtful eyes. But it's easier to rule through fear than love. Fear only requires occasional demonstrations of power. Love demands constant nurturing. Our conversation was interrupted by Thea's arrival in the garden, her severe presence immediately changing the atmosphere. A messenger has arrived, she announced. The king returns tonight with Alaric of Stone Ridge. My heart leaped at the news of Rowan's return, then immediately contracted at the mention of Alaric. Ethan's father is coming here? Apparently the king was persuasive. Thea's tone suggested that persuasive might be an understatement. You are to prepare the child and yourself for a formal presentation in the Great Hall at dusk. With that, she turned and left, her posture rigid with disapproval. Mara helped me bathe and dress Ethan in fine clothes that had been specially made for him. tiny garments of soft leather and wool, embroidered with the royal symbols. For myself, I was provided a dress of deep green that was far more elegant than anything I'd ever worn, with silver embroidery that subtly echoed the pattern of my wolf pendant. "You look like you belong here," Mara said, as she helped arrange my hair, twisting the blonde strands into an intricate style adorned with small silver beads. "I don't, though," I replied, staring at my reflection in the polished silver mirror. "No matter how they dress me," Mara's hand stilled on my shoulders. "Don't be so certain. The king sees something in you that matters to him." Before I could ask what she meant, another servant arrived to escort us to the great hall. The atmosphere was tense when we entered. The hall packed with Lycans from both Rowan's pack and presumably the Stone Ridge visitors. They parted to let us pass, whispers following in our wake. I held Ethan close, his weight a comfort against the scrutiny. Rowan stood on the dais, looking travel-worn, but commanding in dark leather and fur. Beside him was a Lycan I assumed to be Alaric, slightly shorter but powerfully built, with the same golden eyes as the king, but hair of a lighter brown streaked with premature silver. His face might have been handsome if not for the contemptuous curl of his lip. When our eyes met across the hall, his narrowed in open hostility, I forced myself to continue forward, chin high, focusing instead on Rowan, whose gaze held mine with unexpected warmth. "Eleanor Bennett," he called as I approached the dais. "Bring forth the child." I climbed the few steps, intensely aware of all eyes upon us. Ethan, sensing the tension, whimpered softly, and I whispered reassurances as I presented him to the assembled Lycans. "Behold Ethan of the royal line," Rowan proclaimed. "Son of Alaric, heir to Stone Ridge, abandoned at birth and rescued by a human healer who showed more compassion than his own kind." Alaric's face contorted with rage. "I did not abandon him," he snarled. "He was stolen from us." "Lies," Rowan replied calmly. "Eleanor found him alone at the boundary of your territory, unfed, uncared for, left to the elements." "And we're to take the word of a human?" Alaric spat. "She probably stole him herself." I stepped forward, anger overriding caution. "I found him 3 days before meeting your king, half-starved and crying in the underbrush. If he was stolen, why wasn't an alarm raised? Why weren't search parties sent?" Alaric bared his teeth at me, and I instinctively stepped back, clutching Ethan closer. "You will not threaten her in my hall," Rowan said, his voice dangerously soft. He moved to stand between us, a living barrier of muscle and authority. "The evidence is clear, cousin. The pup bears your bloodline's mark, yet you reported no missing child. He was abandoned because of his disabilities, in violation of my decree ending such practices." Alaric's gaze shifted to his son, taking in the splinted leg and smaller arm. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite remorse, but perhaps recognition. "What would you have me do?" he asked Rowan, his voice lower now, less confrontational. "Acknowledge him publicly as your son," Rowan replied. "Grant him his rightful place in the Stone Ridge hierarchy, with all privileges and protections of his bloodline." Alaric's jaw worked as he considered this. "And if I refuse? Then he remains here, under my direct protection, as my heir." Rowan's statement caused a ripple of shock through the hall. Even I couldn't hide my surprise. This went far beyond what he had suggested before leaving. Alaric paled. "You would make a cripple your heir to punish me." "I would make a worthy pup my heir, because he carries our bloodline and deserves his birthright," Rowan corrected coldly. "His disabilities will heal with proper care. The true defect of character lies not in him, but in those who would abandon their own blood." The two alpha Lycans stared at each other, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Alaric's shoulders slumped slightly. "I acknowledge him as my son," he said, the words dragged from him reluctantly. "But he cannot return to Stone Ridge yet, not until he is stronger." "A convenient excuse," Rowan said, his tone making it clear he saw through the ploy. "Very well. Ethan will remain here for now, under my protection and the care of Eleanor Bennett, who has proven her worth to the royal line." At this, Alaric's head snapped up. "A human caring for a Lycan royal? It's unseemly, unnatural, and yet she has done what you would not." Rowan retorted. She will continue as his caretaker, with all rights and privileges that entails. I stood frozen, realizing that Rowan had just elevated my status far beyond what I'd expected. From the murmurs spreading through the hall, it was clear that everyone else was equally shocked. Do you accept this responsibility, Eleanor Bennett? Rowan asked, turning to me, his golden eyes intense. Looking down at Ethan, who had curled his small hand around my finger, I knew there was only one answer I could give. I do, I said clearly, my voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall. Then it is settled. Rowan placed a hand on my shoulder, the weight and warmth of it sending that now familiar current through my body. Ethan remains here, acknowledged by his father, but under joint custody of the crown and his chosen caretaker. Alaric looked as if he might protest further, but a warning glance from Rowan silenced him. With a stiff bow, he stepped back, conceding the point if not agreeing with it. There will be a feast to celebrate Ethan's formal acknowledgement, Rowan announced to the gathered Lycans, and to honor the alliance between our packs and the human healer who has earned her place among us. As the assembly dispersed to prepare for the feast, Rowan led me and Ethan to a small antechamber off the main hall. Once the door closed behind us, he seemed to relax slightly, some of the rigid formality leaving his posture. You did well, he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. Standing up to Alaric took courage. I was just defending Ethan, I replied, adjusting the pup in my arms as he began to fuss. May I? Rowan asked, holding out his hands. Somewhat surprised, I transferred Ethan to him, watching as the powerful Lycan king cradled the small pup with practiced ease. Ethan immediately quieted, reaching up to touch Rowan's face with curious fingers. He likes you, I observed. We are kin, Rowan said simply. Then, his voice dropping lower. As you and I are becoming. I looked up sharply, finding his golden eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. What do you mean? The position I've given you, caretaker to a royal pup, it makes you part of the pack structure, he explained. Not quite Lycan, but no longer merely human, something in between. And is that what you wanted? I asked, suddenly needing to understand his motives. Rowan was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to Ethan before returning to me. What I want, he said carefully, is changing, evolving. But yes, keeping you close is what I want. 6 months passed in a blur of new routines and unexpected joys. Spring arrived, melting the snow, and bringing life back to the forest surrounding the castle. Ethan grew stronger each day, his leg healing so well that he now crawled with surprising speed across any surface we set him on. His arm would always be smaller than the other, but Mara's exercises were increasing its strength and mobility beyond what anyone had thought possible. I had settled into a strange new life, not quite Lycan, not quite human, as Rowan had described it. The castle had become home, its stone walls familiar, its inhabitants gradually warming to my presence as they witnessed my devotion to Ethan. Even Thea had softened somewhat, though she maintained a formal distance. Rowan was complicated. His duties often took him away from the castle, mediating disputes between packs, enforcing his reforms across the territories. But when he returned, he always sought out Ethan and me first, before even changing from his travel clothes. We had developed an easy companionship, spending evenings in his study where he would hold Ethan while we discussed everything from pack politics to human literature. Sometimes I would catch him watching me with that same intense gaze I couldn't quite decipher, but he never pushed for more than friendship. Perhaps the divide between our worlds was too great, even with my unusual position in the pack. Or perhaps I was imagining the connection I felt whenever we were close. On this particular evening, I stood on the castle ramparts, watching the sunset paint the forest in shades of gold. Ethan was asleep after a day of exciting developments. He had spoken his first word, up, and pulled himself to standing for nearly a minute before tumbling back onto his cushioned play area. He's getting stronger. Rowan's deep voice came from behind me, and I turned to find him approaching along the stone walkway. He looked weary but content, having returned that morning from a week-long journey to the northern packs. Yes, I agreed, smiling at the thought of our charge's progress. Mara thinks he might walk before his first birthday. A remarkable recovery, Rowan came to stand beside me at the parapet, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Though perhaps not so remarkable, with you caring for him. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. It's a joint effort. Your healers, your protection, our protection, he corrected gently. You're as much his guardian as I am now. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Alaric has requested another visit, Rowan said eventually. He's coming in a fortnight. My stomach tightened at the news. Alaric had visited twice since that first confrontation, each time assessing Ethan with critical eyes, searching for progress while barely acknowledging me. Does he still talk about taking Ethan back to Stone Ridge? He does. Rowan's jaw tightened. But I've made it clear that won't happen until Ethan is much older, if at all. The pup belongs here now. With us remained unspoken, but I heard it nonetheless. There's something else, Rowan continued, turning to face me fully. The dying sunlight caught in his eyes, making them gleam like actual gold. Delegations from all the major packs are gathering here next month for the summer solstice. It's a significant event. A celebration? I asked, noting the unusual hesitation in his voice. More than that. A confirmation of alliances, a renewal of vows to the crown. He paused. And traditionally, a time when the king announces major decisions affecting the kingdom. Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. What kind of decisions? Rowan's eyes held mine, searching. The kind that change futures, establish new traditions. His hand moved to cover mine where it rested on the stone parapet. I wanted to ask you something, Eleanor. Before he could continue, hurried footsteps sounded on the stairs leading to the ramparts. Thea appeared, her expression unusually animated. My king, she called. Riders approach from the east, Stone Ridge colors but not Alaric's standard. They claim urgency. Rowan's expression hardened instantly. The vulnerability of a moment ago replaced by the mask of kingship. I'll meet them in the Great Hall. He squeezed my hand once before releasing it. We'll continue this conversation later. I followed them down to the Great Hall, curious and concerned about these unexpected visitors. By the time I arrived, 4 Lycans in Stone Ridge colors were already kneeling before Rowan, who had taken his place on the throne. Rise and speak, he commanded. What brings you here with such haste? The leader of the small group stood, her face grave. My king, I am Sarah, second to Alpha Alaric. I come bearing dire news. 3 days ago, our pack was attacked by the River Clan rebels. They struck at night, targeting the main settlement. She swallowed hard. Alaric was gravely wounded defending the pack. Before he lost consciousness, he named you guardian to his son and heir, and asked that you protect Stone Ridge in his absence. Murmurs spread through the hall as Lycans gathered, drawn by the commotion. Rowan remained still, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts. And Alaric's condition now? He asked. Stable, but unconscious. Our healers are doing what they can, but... Sarah's voice faltered. They are not optimistic, my king. Rowan stood, his decision immediate. Thea, prepare our forces. We ride to Stone Ridge at first light. He turned to Sarah. You and your companions will rest here tonight. I'll need details of the attack, the rebels' movements, everything you know. As the hall erupted into activity, Rowan caught my eye across the crowd and gave a small nod toward the side chamber where we had spoken after Ethan's acknowledgement ceremony. I made my way there, understanding he would join me when he could. Nearly an hour passed before the door opened and Rowan entered, his face etched with concern and determination. I must go, he said without preamble. Stone Ridge needs immediate reinforcement. And if Alaric dies? He left the sentence unfinished. Ethan becomes his heir, I completed for him. A baby who can't even walk yet. Yes. Which makes him, and you, targets. Rowan ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. The River Clan rebels oppose everything I've worked for. The reforms, the alliance with humans, the protection of the disabled. They would see Ethan's existence as an abomination, a weakness in the bloodline. Fear coiled in my stomach. What do we do? You and Ethan will come with me to Stone Ridge, he he said, the decision clearly already made. To the heart of the conflict? I asked, alarmed. To the heart of his birthright, Rowan countered. The pack needs to see him, to be reminded of what they're fighting for. And he'll be safer with me, with us, than anywhere else. The inclusion sent a surge of warmth through me despite the circumstances. When do we leave? At dawn. Pack only what you need. His expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Eleanor. This isn't what I planned for tonight. Life rarely goes according to plan, I said, thinking of how a small abandoned pup had changed the entire course of mine. We'll be ready. The journey to Stone Ridge took 2 days, our party moving at remarkable speed, considering it included a full contingent of warriors and a baby. Ethan seemed to thrive on the adventure, watching the changing landscape with wide golden eyes, unperturbed by the tension surrounding us. Stone Ridge itself was beautiful, a series of settlements built into and around massive rock formations that jutted from the earth like the spines of some giant beast. The main pack house was a sprawling structure of stone and timber that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. We were greeted with a mixture of relief and wariness. Relief at the arrival of their king and his forces, wariness at the presence of a human in their midst. But none dared question Rowan's decision to bring me, not when I carried Ethan in my arms, the living symbol of their wounded alpha's bloodline. Alaric lay in a large chamber in the heart of the pack house, attended by healers who looked exhausted and grim. His normally powerful body seemed diminished against the furs, a massive bandage wrapped around his chest where, I was told, a poisoned blade had struck dangerously close to his heart. The poison resists our treatments, the head healer explained to Rowan. It's something new, something the rebels must have acquired from outside our territories. I stepped closer to the bed, my healer's instincts responding to the challenge. May I? I asked, gesturing to the bandages. The Lycan healers looked to Rowan, who nodded. Let her see. She has knowledge we may lack. Gently handing Ethan to Mara, who had accompanied us, I approached Alaric's bedside. The wound beneath the bandages was angry and inflamed, with strange black tendrils spreading outward from the entry point. I leaned closer, inhaling carefully, detecting an odor that triggered a memory. Nightshade and something else, I murmured, thinking back to my grandmother's lessons on poisons and their antidotes. Silver nitrate, perhaps, mixed with a binding agent to slow the body's natural healing. Can you treat it? Rowan asked, coming to stand beside me. I nodded slowly. I think so. I'd need specific herbs, some of which I brought with me, and clean water, preferably from a running stream rather than a well. Within hours, I was working alongside the Lycan healers, preparing poultices and tinctures from my supplies combined with their native plants. The collaboration was unprecedented. Human healing knowledge merged with Lycan traditions, but necessity overcame prejudice. 3 days passed in an exhausting cycle of treatments, brief rest, and vigilant care. Alaric's fever spiked dangerously on the second night, and I stayed at his bedside, applying cool cloths and administering the antidote I'd prepared. Rowan joined me in the small hours of the morning, Ethan sleeping peacefully in his arms. You should rest, he said quietly, watching as I changed the bandages again. So should you, I countered, noting the shadows beneath his eyes. Between coordinating the defense of Stone Ridge and checking on Alaric's condition, he'd barely slept. I'm accustomed to it. He settled into a chair near the bed, adjusting Ethan against his chest. How is he? The poison is receding, I said, showing him the wound where the black tendrils had begun to fade. If he makes it through the night, I think he'll recover. Relief flashed across Rowan's face, quickly replaced by his usual composed expression. Good. The pack needs him, and Ethan needs his father, I added softly, though the thought of Alaric taking a more active role in Ethan's life created a complicated ache in my chest. Rowan's eyes met mine across the room. Ethan needs those who truly care for him, who see his value beyond his bloodline. That's you, Eleanor. That will always be you. The simple declaration, spoken in the quiet intimacy of the sick room, moved something deep within me. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge what I'd been feeling for months, a connection to this powerful, complex man who had shown me more respect and understanding than anyone in my human village ever had. Alaric stirred on the bed, drawing my attention back to my patient. His eyes fluttered open, golden like his son's, but clouded with pain and confusion. "Where?" he rasped. "You're home," I told him, checking his pulse. "You were attacked, poisoned. But you're healing now." His gaze focused on me, recognition dawning. "The human healer," he murmured. Then, seeing Rowan with Ethan, "My son is safe," Rowan assured him, rising to bring Ethan closer. "As is your pack. Rest now, cousin. Regain your strength." Alaric's eyes moved between the three of us, Rowan, Ethan, and me. A strange expression crossing his features before he slipped back into sleep, this time more peaceful than before. "That's a good sign," I said, relief washing through me. His body is focusing on healing now, not fighting the poison. Rowan nodded, then gently passed Ethan to me. "Stay with them. I need to check the perimeter, meet with the guards." Before he left, he paused beside me, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. The touch was brief but deliberate, a promise of something to be continued when the crisis passed. Over the next week, Alaric's condition improved steadily. As he regained strength, I watched him with Ethan, noting how his initial clinical assessment of his son's disabilities had transformed into something resembling genuine interest. He asked questions about Ethan's development, observed his attempts at movement, even held him for short periods. "You've done well with him," Alaric admitted grudgingly one afternoon as I changed his bandages. "Better than—" He trailed off. "Better than you expected from a human?" I supplied, keeping my tone neutral. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Yes, I was wrong about that at least." He glanced toward the window where Ethan was playing on a blanket in the sunlight, Mara watching over him. "I was wrong about many things. It's not too late to be the father he deserves," I said, securing the fresh bandage. Alaric studied me with those golden eyes so like his son's. "And where would that leave you, Eleanor Bennett? You've become his mother in all but blood." The observation startled me with its accuracy and unexpected insight. Before I could formulate a response, Rowan entered the room, his presence immediately filling the space. He nodded to his cousin, then came to stand beside me. "The rebels have been pushed back across the northern border," he reported. "Their forces were smaller than we feared, their support among the packs minimal." "Good news," Alaric said, attempting to sit up straighter. "When will you return to the capital?" "Soon," Rowan replied. "Once you're well enough to resume leadership here. There's the solstice gathering to prepare for." Alaric's eyes moved between us again, that same strange expression crossing his features. "Yes, the solstice. A time for new beginnings, they say." That evening, Rowan found me on the balcony of the guest quarters I'd been assigned, watching as twilight descended over Stone Ridge. Ethan was already asleep inside, tired out from a day of continued progress. He had stood unassisted for nearly 5 minutes that afternoon. "We'll leave in 2 days, Rowan said, coming to stand beside me. "Alaric is recovering well enough now." I nodded, my feelings mixed. The past week had been tense, but also rewarding, seeing how my healing knowledge could help the pack, witnessing Alaric's grudging acceptance of his son. "What happens now?" I asked. "With Ethan, I mean." "Alaric has asked that Ethan remain with us at the capital," Rowan replied. "At least until he's older, stronger. He acknowledges that the care you provide is best for his development." Relief flooded me at the news that we wouldn't be separated. "And after that?" "After that?" Rowan turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. "After that depends on decisions yet to be made. Which brings me back to what I wanted to ask you on the ramparts before we were interrupted." My heart began to race as he continued, his golden eyes intent on mine. "The solstice gathering isn't just a celebration or a political assembly. It's also when a king traditionally announces his choice of mate." His hands tightened slightly around mine. "I've spent years unifying the packs through force when necessary, reform when possible. But there's been something missing. Balance. Compassion to temper strength. Rowan," I breathed, hardly daring to believe what he seemed to be suggesting. "You possess everything the future queen of the Lycans should embody," he said, his voice deepening with emotion. Strength in gentleness, wisdom in healing, courage in the face of prejudice and danger. But I'm human, I whispered. An Omega. You're Eleanor, he countered. The woman who saved a royal pup when his own kind abandoned him. The woman who faced down alphas without flinching. The woman who healed not just Ethan but Alaric. And perhaps me. He drew me closer, one hand releasing mine to touch the silver pendant at my throat. This symbol of alliance between our kinds was a beginning. What I'm proposing is the fulfillment of that promise. Human and Lycan, joined not just in alliance but in something deeper. Are you asking me to be your mate? I clarified, needing to hear the words directly. I'm asking you to be my queen, my balance, my heart, he said, the declaration simple yet profound. To raise Ethan with me, to help heal the divisions between our kinds, to stand beside me as we create a world where no child is abandoned for being different. Tears blurred my vision as the full meaning of his proposal washed over me. This wasn't just about us. It was about transformation, about creating a new future from the broken pieces of the old. There will be opposition, he warned, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. From traditionalists in the packs, from humans who fear our kind. There's always opposition to change, I said, finding my voice. But compassion in a cruel world isn't weakness. It's the greatest form of rebellion. His smile at hearing my grandmother's words reflected back to him was radiant, transforming his usually serious face into something breathtaking. Is that a yes, Eleanor Bennett? He asked, his arms encircling my waist, drawing me against the solid warmth of his body. Yes, I whispered, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the scar that marked him as a survivor, a warrior. Yes to all of it. His kiss was gentle at first, a question and an answer in one. Then it deepened, years of solitude and longing on both sides igniting into something powerful and transformative. I felt the connection between us strengthen and expand, as if the silver pendant at my throat had melded our separate worlds into one shared future. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the stars had emerged fully in the night sky above Stone Ridge. From inside the room came a small sound, Ethan waking, sensing perhaps the momentous shift that had just occurred. Rowan and I went to him together, finding him standing in his crib, golden eyes bright in the dim light. He reached for both of us, one hand extended to each. No preference, no distinction between the king and the healer, the Lycan and the human. Pack, he said clearly, his second word ever spoken, and perfectly chosen for the moment. Yes, little one, I agreed, lifting him into our joined embrace. We are pack now. As I stood there with Ethan between us, Rowan's arms encircling us both, I thought of the journey that had brought me here. From outcast healer to future queen, from solitary wanderer to the heart of a family. The abandoned pup had led me to my true home, and in saving him, I had found my own salvation. The moon rose over Stone Ridge, full and bright, illuminating our three figures in the silvery light. Not human, not Lycan, but something new, something stronger.